I'm sure that's the line everyone remembers from this movie. Malachi yelling, "Outlander!" Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Cemetery Club. Okay guys, Children of the Corn. This movie from 1984 is a movie that I watched at sleepovers. My friends and I rented it many times. It was something that we really enjoyed, and I have very nostalgic things wrapped up in the watching of it, so I'm going to be probably a little generous with the movie. It does differ quite a bit from the short story. I haven't watched this movie in so long, so when I rewatched it, it was very interesting to me that I was able to remember exact scenes and exact dialogue and stuff like that in certain parts. So, opening credits, already we have this creepy music with evil little children, and the music throughout this very much reminded me of like a combination The Omen and Pet Sematary. So this would be pre-Pet Sematary, but it just has that like creepy children, but also a choral type score. So like in The Omen, where it's very orchestral and it's like mashed in together. So one of the first things I noticed is that it was a Gatlin production, and Gatlin is the name of the fictitious town where all of this takes place. And then another thing that really made me laugh out loud is during a scene there is night shift. So the book where the short story lives, it was on the dashboard of the car. It wasn't there for very long, and I would not have put that together when I first watched this movie because I did not know that was night shift. It has the cover with the bandaged hands with the eyes. So I thought that was really funny. I love when a movie is self-aware like that, when they put in little nuggets like that. It's just endlessly amusing. We do have two children who aren't in the short story, Job and Sarah, and they are the little heroes of the movie. I like both of them. I thought they were fine children actors. A lot of times I have issues with the child acting, but I thought they did a good job. They helped out Linda Hamilton and Peter Horton, their characters. They helped them survive the movie. And Sarah is someone who has visions, and then she makes drawings of these visions. And that, in the short story, is kind of the role of Isaac. So Isaac has a very small part in the short story. Malachi isn't really technically in the short story, but the person that Bert stabs in the short story, who has red hair, I took that always to be Malachi, just an unnamed Malachi because of the red hair. I don't know if that's what they were going for when they cast Malachi, but in this movie, Isaac has a huge role. He is in charge, and Malachi is kind of his little henchman who actually messes up a lot. You know, watching it as a kid, I probably didn't notice so much, but Malachi is just a complete fuck up. He ruins almost everything. And Isaac has just this creepy face. He does creepy really well. And there's that scene when they massacre all the adults after church, and he's looking into the diner window, and just the evil expression on his face gives you chills. And yeah. So I think that the fact that these kids are killing people, killing adults, they use such, I don't even want to say old-fashioned weapons, but they use such unconventional weapons. But it's really effective. And some of these like farm instruments, they are just really scary. And it's just stuff that you could buy at your local hardware store or some sort of farming supply store. But those weapons in the hands of these kids, it's just really scary, especially like the hook type ones where they have like a handle and then the hook comes out, or the scythe. Those things are just really unsettling for me to imagine getting offed with one of those things. I actually think anything that is a handheld weapon like that, where you have to get close to someone pretty much to kill them, those make me the most nervous. And I think that's because it is probably easy to distance yourself from a weapon like a bow and arrow or a gun that you can shoot from a distance and you're not right up in there against a person. But, you know, like Michael Myers, Jason, those weapons are so intimate because you have to be close. It's just, I don't know, it's a little thing that I have. So in the movie, Bert and Vicky are actually a cute, happy couple. In the short story, they are on the verge of divorce and they are just at each other's throats, and I think that Bert doesn't necessarily care what happens to Vicky. In the short story, Vicky is even really bitchy to him when they hit the kid. And in this movie, I think their relationship is just so much cuter and you root for them more as a couple. So after they have their car accident where they run over the boy, Vicky is kind of thrown back against her seat and has suffered a kind of, not a head trauma, but she got jostled pretty badly. And Bert makes her sit in the car and wait for him while he goes to investigate, and he goes into the cornfields to check things out. And as she is laying there in the car, Malachi approaches, and that is one of the creepiest scenes, where he just, in broad daylight, comes up to her with a knife in his hand and tries the door. And then we find out that she is dreaming because she gets out of the car and goes over to the dead body, and the dead body wakes up. So there are some jump scares in this. There's a huge one at the end. As Bert and Vicky are trying to figure out what to do with the body of the kid, they're driving around and looking at a map and trying to decide what town, and I noticed that Bert takes his eyes off of the road to help look at the map after he already hit a child. I mean, wouldn't that make you extra paranoid, extra cautious while you're driving? I would think so. And they decide they're going to go to Gatlin. So they head to Gatlin, they meet a man at the gas station who tries to turn them away. He tells them to go to their town. Well, the signage is all messed up, and so they end up taking all these signs telling them to go to Gatlin. So they basically end up in Gatlin. So it's like the saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, all roads really lead to Gatlin. They arrive there, it's deserted. The set looks amazing. The whole rundown town, it's completely deserted. No cars even. I wonder what the kids did with the cars. So there are corn stalks everywhere. Like, corn stalks are just jammed into things. So it gives it this like sense of decay and dryness. So there are all these corn stalks in the mailbox and in the trash cans and lining the street. It's very interesting. So Vicky and Bert end up at Job and Sarah's house, and they meet Sarah, and Bert decides that he is going to go to town hall. He's going to go to the town hall and leave Vicky at the house with Sarah. And that seems like a very bad idea, but Bert says that it's weird in this town, but it's safe, which I don't know how he can gauge that. Everything we've seen up to this point shows that they should have continued on their way. They should have just taken the body elsewhere. And once they're separated, the creepy children surround the house. So Vicky is trapped up there with Sarah, and the kids with their farm equipment descend, and they capture her. Now, the crucifixion of Vicky isn't quite a crucifixion. They don't use barbed wire, like in the short story. They don't pluck her eyes out. It's very, very tame, and she's just kind of sent up onto this cross corn, and she is supposed to wait. Bert realizes he probably shouldn't have left Vicky alone. And then we get this depiction of a religious ceremony that the kids are having, and they have like a bowl that's made out of corn. So there are kernels on the outside of this hollowed out bowl, and they cut symbols into their chests and drip blood in, and then they're going to drink it as the person is supposed to go into the corn. And they're just these creepy feral children, and they're so fervent. Like they're just loving this, and they decide they have to kill Bert and Vicky, and they go about trying to do that. And I just, there is such a sense of terror in this movie. Now the special effects, the like blobs of color, so these like pixels basically that envelop Isaac are pretty terrible, and the explosion, the fire parts, the actual fire is pretty good, but then the like trying to put a face into the fire, not so good. The earth coming up in a mound as it chases people, kind of like a Tremors type creature under the ground, that was pretty effective. But for the most part, not so great with the special effects. Also the corn grabbing onto Bert, that was a pretty good special effect. The corn kind of moves back so he can enter, and like it wraps around him and tries to hold him down because it doesn't want to be burned. And I thought that was a pretty decent special effect. It's only a certain few that are really, really bad. The tension between Isaac and Malachi is very palpable, and I find it humorous that Malachi is just so into his role, and he is so into trying to wrest power away from Isaac. He obviously wants to be in charge. He thinks he knows best. Their little friendship / rivalry is interesting, and I thought they did a good job with their acting. They do end up switching Vicky out with Isaac because Malachi kind of takes over, and he decides that they're going to use Vicky as bait. So they cut her down, they put Isaac up in her stead, and that's when Isaac gets consumed by this crazy pixelation thing. And then Isaac comes back, which is something you don't necessarily expect, and he goes after Malachi, and he kind of looks like he could be Gage's older brother. I wonder if the person who did Pet Sematary kind of drew from any of Children of the Corn, because it does have little elements like that, you know, are very similar. And Isaac just looks really, really scary. Like a scary little child. And he says, he wants you too, Malachi. So that's a pretty chilling scene. That's one of my favorite scenes, and it's very unexpected. Bert and Vicky and then the children, they all blow up the cornfield, and they figure that's probably enough, and then it turns into this kind of sappy, like, Bert and Vicky now have 2 little kids who are gonna hang out with them. They're gonna all escape together. They're gonna walk into the next town, and then we get the jump scare where the girl who is hiding in their car as he's trying to get a map, Bert's trying to reach in and grab a map, she sits up and has a big old scythe, and she's going to stab him, but he reacts too quickly and knocks her out. So it was all very anticlimactic. I kind of wish that they had killed off Bert or Vicky. They both technically die in the short story, so if they had both died, that would have been fine. But yeah, they kind of built it up and then just nothing. You know, it was one of those abrupt ends that just had nowhere else to go. All in all, I'm guessing this movie is not for a lot of people. I think part of the charm for me is watching it as a child, and it was probably a lot more creepy because I was a kid. It's a good classic horror movie, and you know, if you haven't watched it, do. I actually have not seen the many sequels that have come out, so maybe eventually I'll watch those and talk about those, but for now, I recommend the first one, but go into it kind of expecting it to be not so great. Have a spooky day.